Joseph, what's up, man? You ready for video number 2? This is probably one of the more exciting areas of the water column, the middle of the water column. And this could be anywhere from 6 inches below the surface to 6 inches above the ground. So if you're in a really deep lake, that's a lot of water to cover. I'm giving you some of my favorite baits that I feel are going to produce for you, especially in the south. It's been a long time since I fished down there, but these produced for me 20 years ago down there. I'm sure that they're still fish producers to this day. So let's jump in. Middle of the water column, yeah. All right, first thing we're going to talk about, hard baits. You got 2 hard baits coming from me, both in the crankbait category, right? So first and foremost, we have a shallow running crankbait. Not a square bill, more of a round bill or a coffin bill. This is Excite Baits XB5, dives 2 to 5 feet. It weighs about 5/8 of an ounce, or I'm sorry, it weighs half an ounce. This is going to cast really, really well on bait casting gear or spinning gear. The most important thing when it comes to fishing a crankbait like this is making sure that this guy is running into and bouncing off of things like the ground, or logs, stumps, big rocks, big boulders. A lot of times when you're fishing a crankbait, that's when your strikes will come. Another super important tip to take into consideration with this is the rate of retrieve. It's going to be much more effective if you cast it out, reel it in, and vary your retrieve. What I mean by that is reel, 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 pause. Reel, 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 pause. Reel, reel, pause. Make it erratic and throw in some pauses into your retrieve. And a lot of times you're going to get smacked when you, on those pauses or right after those pauses. Not necessarily the best bait to dig into the bottom of the ground when you've got a lot of bottom vegetation. But if let's say you're fishing 6 foot of water and there's a little bit of grass down there, this guy's going to dive down to 5 feet. If it gets hung up on the grass, give your rod a twitch and try and knock it free of that grass. And a lot of times as it's getting ripped out, that's when your strikes are going to come. Really cool little bait. This bait floats. So when you pause, this bait is going to dig, 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 and you pause and it's going to rise. Dig, 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 pause, it's going to rise. Moving on to the lipless crankbait. It can be fished a lot of different ways. This bait sinks. So this is going to be slightly different. This bait you can cast out to the bottom, lift your rod tip up 1 to 3 feet, and then let it drop back down. That's called yo-yoing, or you can cast this out and reel it in, steady retrieve. Same thing with the other crankbait. If you feel this start to get hung up on grass, give your rod a decent twitch, try and rip it out of some of that grass, and you will get smashed. But this is going to work really, really well in the spring and in the fall. Same thing with this. This is going to work really, really well in spring and fall when bass are keyed in on feeding on bait fish. This is going to represent more of like a golden shiner in your area. This is going to represent like a bluegill or even a silver shiner in your area. Gonna talk about some blade baits. We'll start off with the underspin. This is basically a swim bait with a small blade on it. This is really considered to be a kind of a finesse application. This is not a super heavy lure. This weighs 3/8 of an ounce. You should be able to cast this on bait casting tackle. You can definitely cast this on spinning tackle. This is going to be, I would recommend throwing this when the bass are not heavily feeding. If a storm has come through and it's a post-frontal day, bluebird skies, this might be something that you want to cast out, let sink all the way to the bottom, give it a quick twitch up, and then slow reel it back to the bank or back to the shore or back to the boat. The blade is going to give a little vibration, a little flash. This will also come in really, really handy if you see bass busting on schools of bait in the middle of a lake. You can cast this out, and as soon as it hits the water in that area, engage your reel and let this bait kind of pendulum down through the baits. This can elicit some strikes from those hard to catch schooling bass as well. Careful around wood because there is no weed guard here and this will get stuck, okay? Moving on, one of my all-time favorites in the South, the spinner baits. This is a 1/2 ounce Stanley wedge. This is a double willow blade. Double willow stands for the types of blades that are on here. These are willow blades. This is a brim or a bluegill color. I really like gold blades when I'm trying to imitate bluegills. This bait gets chewed up, especially in the spring, especially in the fall. Anywhere there's going to be bluegill swimming around, on the edges of weed lines, on the edges of rocks and riprap banks, anywhere anywhere you see bluegill, this is going to get eaten. So really pretty good weedless bait. You can throw this into, you know, sunken timber. You can throw this around docks, and you can throw this in around grass, and this is going to come through a lot. You can even put a little trailer on the back of here. There's a little trailer keeper on the hook, so if you wanted to put a little swim bait or a little fluke back here to give it some more body, some more bulk, help the bait slow down a little bit in the water, you could. Forgot to mention something. One of the things to understand about a spinnerbait is it's going to put off a lot of vibration underwater, which the bass are going to feel on their lateral line, and it's also going to put off flash from those blades, which the bass are going to be able to see. So this is going to work really, really well in water conditions that are not crystal clear. You're going to want to throw this if you've got, you know, 8 inches to 2 feet, 3 feet of visibility. During the springs when we have lots of rain, this works really, really well. I have found that spinner baits usually produce better for me when the sun is not out. The swim jig. Dun, dun, dun. This is going to be one of your confidence baits. I started throwing these just a few years ago, and man, oh man, especially if you're a bank fisherman, this guy's going to come in handy for you in a lot of different scenarios and areas. This is a super high quality bait brought to you by Moccasin Lures. I was recently turned on to this company by a buddy of mine here in the Midwest, Greg at Backyard Bassin. If you guys haven't seen his channel, I would highly recommend going over there, checking him out. Great tips, great techniques. Greg's very, very knowledgeable in the sport and in the industry. He turned me on to this company, Moccasin Lures. I highly recommend that if you're needing more jigs of this nature, you look these guys up on their website. Some of the best quality swim jigs and football jigs I've seen in a long time. But on to the good stuff. How do you rig this? How do you fish this? So tie your line here. You're going to see that this kind of has a triangular shaped head. This is going to help it come through grass. This weed guard is going to try and help you be as weedless as possible around brush and timber and things of that nature. But this is kind of like a 4-wheel drive vehicle. You can throw this almost anywhere. You can throw this around stumps. You can throw this into weed lines. You can throw this into the cattails. And a majority of the time you're going to come out clean on the other side. I highly recommend putting a swim bait trailer behind here, and I just have included some swim bait trailers specifically for this. So how do you put a swim jig trailer on here? Hold it by the hook, hang it upside down. You can see your bait keeper is going to be there. That's what's going to hold your plastic on. And then you're just going to thread it on. I'm going to line this up, meaning I'm going to put this like where it should typically be on the how it's going to look once it's rigged, and that's going to help me determine where the hook's going to come out, and I'll explain why in a second. Because I like to, hook's going to come out right around the edge of my thumb. I like to put a little mark in the bait, right? So I just have a little bit of a marker. I didn't really dig into the bait and damage it, but I want to know where it's going to come out, and if I want to be able to thread this on as straight as possible. So I'm going to go into the middle of the bait, and I'm going to pinch it, and I want to try and hold this and bring this down in one straight line. And then I want to try and figure out, okay, where's it coming out? Where's my mark, right? And I think my mark is right down there. So I've got to come down a little bit further and then come out right by my mark, and then push this bait up onto this keeper. That's what it's going to look like swimming through the water. If you've got shad in your lakes, if you've got minnows in your lakes, if you don't have any shad or minnows at all, this is still going to get chewed up in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, even in the early winter. Throw this everywhere you possibly can. This is probably going to be one of your best confidence baits. I typically throw shad patterns. I typically have something in white, and then I typically have something in a bluegill type pattern, and then, you know, like a matching type trailer. But I'm going to leave this rigged up for you. I'm just going to throw it back in here. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about your swim jig fish, man, because once you get on that bite, it's a ton of fun. All right, let's move on to the last category, flukes. Right, the weightless fluke. This is the last bait in this category. Just want to show you how I would rig this up. This is going to be using the Texas rig, very similar to what I showed you before. So the important thing to know about this bait, right, there's a top and then there's a bottom. In the bottom, there's a hook slot, and that's just a cavity that helps collapse, so you can guarantee a good hook set and a good hook penetration. Some people rig it like this. A few people I know rig it like this. I typically like to rig mine like this. So two things I'm going to show you. If you want the bait to stick around the top of the water column, so you can fish this a lot of different ways. You can fish this on the top, or you can fish this deep, or you can fish this on bottom. If you want to fish it towards the top of the water column, when you're putting in your hook, stick it in all the way to the hook bend, and then bring it out. Then once you go over the shoulder and you put your eye inside, your eye is like really in there, right? What you've done here is you've kind of centered the hook over the middle of under the middle of the bait. So that's going to cause it to have not have a nose down sink rate. It's going to want to sink like this, which means it's going to sink slower, which means when you twitch, it's going to stay close to the top of the water column. If you want this bait to sink faster, all you have to do when you rig it is go in, don't go all the way in, and come out after about 1/4 inch. Then go over the shoulder, then line it up, go through, T-expose it just like I've showed you in the past. This is going to give it more of a nose down fall. And as you twitch it, it will dart erratically and then go nose down and sink. And then finally, the last way that you can fish it is on bottom. You could fish it Texas rigged with a bullet weight. You could fish it with a shaky head like this. You could fish it a lot of different ways. But this is a super effective bait. It can be used on its own. It can be, you know, weightless at the top, weightless in the middle, non-weighted on the bottom. You can put this on the back of a chatterbait. You can put this on the back of a swim jig. You can put this on the back of a spinnerbait. You can do a lot of different things with this. So I would highly recommend throwing this year-round in your neck of the woods. And I would throw it anywhere, especially where you're going to see bait fish, panfish, minnows. You're going to want to find a retrieve that's going to work really, really well for you. For me, it's typically been twitch, twitch, pause, twitch, pause, twitch, 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 pause. Very similar to a hard jerk bait cadence, but you're just going to have to find what works for them. Some days you're going to find that they're going to want to chew the bluegill. Some days you're going to want to find they're going to want to chew something else. Just let the fish tell you what they want to do. But this concludes the middle of the water column video. Again, you know, drop me some comments down below. Make sure you smash that thumbs up. It really helps with the videos. Drop me some comments. Let's interact. Let me know what questions you have. And yeah, man, I'm looking forward to hearing about some of the fish that you're going to be catching off these baits. Thanks for watching.